speaking of Kickstarters and all these miniatures,
Okay.
are miniatures really that essential for role-playing games? You see where I was going with this. Yeah. I see what you did there.
Mm-hmm.
So, back in the day, miniatures were almost unheard of for like old school D&D players and stuff. You know, they sold them and everything, but most of the time I think you only really needed them if it was some chaotic battle or whatever.
Right.
I mean, how many games did you play? Not recently, which we probably haven't played that many RPGs recently anyway. But back in the day, like high school days or whatever, how many games were you playing that had miniatures?
You're talking role-playing games, right?
Yeah, specifically role-playing games.
I think I tried, I'd say 4 or 5 different ones and none of them.
Yeah. So, I feel like miniatures aren't essential. I really like miniatures. But the thing is, some of the games that came out later, and this is really after I've played so many board games, I actually like it better with miniatures, but there's a trade-off. If you add miniatures, you reduce the amount of imagination that you need to play the game.
Right.
Because you're not like, oh, I'm ducking behind this wall, blah, 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 right? And so you have to visualize everything. D&D 3rd edition came out, 99 or 2000?
Mm-hmm.
And strictly had like miniature combat rules. It was like a board game added on to a role-playing game. And I think that's where, maybe there's some other games, but as far as like the bigger games, that was the one that punched through with the miniatures being a really big thing. And I feel like you add miniatures and you add a lot of tactics and a lot of cool abilities. The one thing I did have a problem with Dungeons & Dragons is like the feats and stuff like that. A lot of them were uninteresting.
Right.
You didn't get a lot of special abilities and stuff like that to really, unless you're playing like a wizard, you're kind of like, I think I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hit that again.
Yes.
You know what? I think I'll hit this and maybe I'll add +2. There wasn't a lot. And the wizard's like, I'm going to cast prismatic spray and then this ice beam to make a bridge. And
yeah,
I mean, they just had so many cool stuff to do. And when it came to combat, the fighter was like, charge, attack. Oh, I get 16 attacks. I'm just going to roll this dice a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Just write down some numbers.
Right.
But games like, for instance, Iron Kingdoms. Iron Kingdoms is the Privateer Press role-playing game of the War Machine and Hordes world. And the miniatures portion of that plays like a miniatures game. Like, okay. I mean, you're busting out a ruler and measuring out. Your guys are charging. You have all these really cool abilities. But it destroys most of the in-combat narrative and in-combat imagination.
Right. Yeah, definitely. When I started playing, it definitely took a lot more imagination. Some might argue you're a little bit at the mercy of the game master because it is totally their call on if you were actually close enough, this and that, blah, blah, blah.
Especially if you didn't have miniatures and you're like, I'm going to throw a fireball. Oh, we all get hit. What do you mean we all get hit?
Exactly. So, I mean, that's one negative to it. Hopefully you just trust your game master to not, kill you all on silly stuff like that. But another downfall to having miniatures is it's so hard to, I mean, let's say you do have a few miniatures, you're not going to have everything you want to fight. So are you going to limit to what you have, or do you sit here and call this knoll a dragon?
Yeah.
And then it totally represents what you're actually doing.
It cheapens the imagination.
Yes.
Because you're like, because you're too focused on the miniature combat going on the table, right. And then you can't really put yourself in the situation and have all this cool thoughts and how things are laid out and things are on fire and everything. Now you're just looking at a grid with guys standing there.
Right.
Unpainted most of the time.
Yes.
Or painted terribly.
Yeah.
If they're pre-purchased. So I get it. I just like the mechanisms that the minis add to the game, but that's coming from a miniatures wargamer and a board gamer. Back in the day when I first started playing like Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, before we moved to 3rd, it was awesome without miniatures. I mean, maybe if it was like, okay, kind of show me where you're at, that was always the funny part, right?
Right.
Oh, he's drawing something. That looks to scale with the miniatures. Show me where you're at. Where do I not want to be?
Yes.
Next to that door, next to any of you.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting. But, I mean, you can't win them all, right?
Exactly.
So, miniatures essential?
No.
I like the mechanisms. So I'm gonna say, if the miniature combat's done good, such as Iron Kingdoms, bring it on, because man, is that straight up amazing.
Right.
But if you're talking Dungeons and Dragons, nah, probably not.